الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. We welcome you to another edition of the Black Imams Roundtable. I am your brother in Islam, Imam Amin Muhammad, and to my right on my screen and probably the left on your screen is our beloved genius Imam Naeem Abdullah, and below us, but definitely not in status, is our Sheikh Abdul Karim Yahya. And inshallah, our Imam Faheem will be joining us soon. But we wanted to have an important dialogue today related to some discussions we had early on this week about Islamic knowledge in general, and particularly Islamic scholarship and the route to Islamic scholarship. And we wanted to clarify some issues related to that because, as you know, we always talk about in the 3453 and in the Shehu and family, we always talk about the importance of sticking to the methodology of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, which is extremely important. And we try to relate and discuss with our fellow imams and teachers of actually establishing in our communities, in particular, the African American community, Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, and what that means. And then how do we implement it in our communities? How is Islamic knowledge acquired? What is the route? From whom? What are the qualifications of those whom one should take knowledge from? And even if they are not present, then what is the next step that one should take? So we're going to have, inshallah, today a thorough discussion on this subject. And due to time, we're going to start with Sheikh Abdul Karim and let him present his thoughts and his reflections on this subject. And then we'll have a little discussion. And then the other imams will add our points of view to the subject, inshallah, and hopefully that it's beneficial to all of us. So we're going to get right into it. We're a little ahead of our normal time, and that was to facilitate Sheikh Abdul Karim to join us, inshallah. So Sheikh Abdul Karim, inshallah, we're going to allow you to begin, inshallah ta'ala.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And it's a blessing to be with the imams and with the brothers and sisters. We ask Allah that He brings benefit by this time that we spend together, that it is a proof for us and not against us. We seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from knowledge which is not of benefit, prayers which are not raised to Allah, to His acceptance, and supplications which are not answered. And I say, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad, wa alihi wa sahbihi wa tabi'ina lahum bi ihsan ila yawm ad-din, wa alayna ma'ahum wa fihim bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Bismillah. So I'm going to set a timer for 15 minutes, and then we're going to try to touch on something about Islamic learning, and inshallah have some back and forth with the imams and the brothers and sisters. So we're going to define some terms first of all. The first term that I will define is al-ilm. al-ilm, which we translate as knowledge. And we can define it as Al-Imam Al-Ghazali defined it in Ihya Ulumuddin. Al-Ilm Al-Shar'i, and he gave a qualification, Shar'i knowledge, or we could translate it as sacred knowledge, knowledge of the Sharia. What is Al-Ilm Al-Shar'i, brothers and sisters? If we talk about someone is involved in learning and teaching, perhaps the term scholar is attributed to them, or seeker of knowledge is attributed to them, or teacher is attributed to them. Ilm, al-ilm al-shar'i, sacred knowledge or revealed knowledge, according to Al-Imam Al-Ghazali, is mastufida min al-ulama, mastufida min al-anbiya, that which is gained, what one benefits from prophets, بغير واسطة العقل كالحساب, without the intermediate means of human reason, as is the case in mathematics. It's not like mathematics. You don't figure it out to get it. ولا التجربة كالطب, nor is it an experimental knowledge, right? You experiment and come to conclusions like medicine is. ولا السماع كاللغة, nor is it just by human transmission solely like language. So when we say ilm shar'i, and if I say ilm in this regard, and today, knowledge, sacred knowledge, or just knowledge in general, if I say this today, what do I mean? What comes from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Not because someone figured it out, not because someone experimented. And that is not to say that either of those are blameworthy, any of those three. All of those are noble things, types of information. Hisab is necessary for the Sharia. You cannot do, inheritance division without it, and other things that we need in life. So it's fard kifaya. Tib is certainly, medicine is certainly fard kifaya, and language is actually one of the instrumental disciplines in studying sacred knowledge, right? They call it ilm al-ala. However, if we say al-ilm al-shar'i, sacred knowledge, we don't mean any of those. We mean what Allah revealed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. More simply, our Sheikh al-Habib Omar defined al-ilm, ma tawallallahu bayanahu wa rasuluh, what Allah himself, what Allah took upon himself to make plain, and his messenger, right? It came from Allah himself and was clarified on the tongue of his messenger, the actions of the messenger, the tacit approvals of the messenger. La ilaha illallah. So then, if we understand that, we understand that that can only be gained from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or someone who soundly connected to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Nobody can figure it out. Nobody has claim to it other than through that pathway, right? They met the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or they connected to him through a sound chain to him, right? So that requires what? A sanad to nubuwah, right? There has to be a continuous transmission to prophecy to receive al-ilm al-shar'i, a sound connected chain of transmission. La ilaha illallah. And that is articulated in the athar of Abdullah bin Mubarak, al-isnadu min ad-din. وَلَوْلَا الْإِسْنَادُ لَقَالَ مَنْ شَاءَ مَا شَاءَ. Attributing and narrating to chains, connected chains of transmission is from the religion. Were it not for that connected transmission, whoever wanted could say whatever they want. So someone could be the biggest PhD or the most popular speaker or influencer or the Imam with the most juice. If they don't have a connection to the Prophet ﷺ in their claims of verses of Quran, and the verses of Quran, it's all canonical, right? But in recitation, you definitely receive ijazah. In hadith, in law, and so on, they don't have something to substantiate their claim of representation of Prophet Muhammad and our scholars would even pay attention to chains of transmission in disciplines like Nahu, right? In Sheikh Amin and the Faqir and others that took from the Hadrami scholars, we narrate chains back to the authors of many of these works, like Imam al-Ghazali, in Madhab, like to Ash-Shafi'i, or later Imam al-Nawawi, or later Ibn Hajar al-Haytami, and what have you. So sacred knowledge is what comes from Allah and the Messenger. How do we attain it? We connect to those of learning who possess a chain to him, right? So knowledge is taken from someone who has an ahliyah, they have an aptitude, and they connect to the Prophet ﷺ, and the early generations and founders of these various disciplines, right? And authors of works. So to gain knowledge, someone must have two things, right? They have an aptitude and they have a connected transmission in that. How is aptitude understood? Aptitude is understood by some sort of testament to the aptitude of that person by their teachers, right? Some places they'll call it ijazah, some places they'll call it idhin, some places the sheikh will just tell them to begin teaching, and there won't be something written and formal, but it's understood. If we want to make it more plain, if you're going to learn from someone, you should know who their teachers are. Someone who didn't have teachers is not given i'tibar. They're not given consideration, right? Like we were studying some Islamic finance fatwa, and we were talking to our Sheikh Al-Habib Omar about some organizational decisions we need to make related to property acquisitions, and so substantiates this given transaction. He asked, Tafaqaha ala yad man? Who taught this individual fiqh, right? How do I know that this person has an aptitude? So that's it. First of all, what's knowledge? Second of all, how do we understand teachers from whom we can take, right? You could take from someone that had teachers, whose teachers authorized them, gave them a vouch, gave them a pass, vouched for them, gave them ijazah, right? Or placed them in a seat of teaching. La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. So then, the last term I would like to define is the term, actually I want to define two terms. The first one is alim. Alim. The definition that I took from my sheikh of an alim, that we would translate as a person of knowledge, right? Or a scholar. You could translate that word as scholar. Men yastaqil bil fatwa fi amat al masail. Someone who can individually answer questions in the majority and generality of questions of the religion, right? They don't call any old faqih an alim, right? Someone might be a faqih who can give fatwa in specific questions in their school, not generally in the religion, and they wouldn't call that person an alim, right? And again, that's representative of a given tradition and a definition I took from my own sheikh. It is very rare in circles of knowledge, like if you met the ulama of Ash-Sham, or you met the scholars of Sham, right, and the seekers of knowledge of Sham, or you met the seekers of knowledge in Tarim and Hadramaut. It is very rare that they'll call an individual an alim, right? They might say he has a footing in knowledge, or he's talib ilm, or so on, right? Alim is for those seniors of the scholars that have reached a level of competency in disciplines across the religion that they can generally answer questions independently. La ilaha illallah. That's one term. Another term we want to define is sheikh. What does sheikh mean? Sheikh is someone who's 40 years old, right? Sheikh is an older person. They might apply in some places the term sheikh to any old man that they happen to meet, like the riwayat about the devil coming to the meeting of Quraysh to decide what to do with the Prophet ﷺ. And they said he came in the form of a sheikh from that area called Najd. What does that mean? An old man from Najd. And then they term sheikh to anyone who reaches the level of fadl, even if they're a child. Anyone who reaches a level of virtue, even if they're a child, right? They might term them sheikh. La ilaha illallah. And then Imam al-Haddad says there are 3 types of sheikh, and he means that in tasawwuf, right? Sheikh ta'aleem, a sheikh of teaching. That is anyone with a competency and a chain of transmission, and you can have many. A sheikh of tahdhib, a sheikh who refines you spiritually. That is someone who has traveled the spiritual path, reached high states of knowledge of Allah, and been returned from those states, to what they call baqa. That's someone who's finished their path. Those people are extremely rare, right? It's not any old person who can narrate awrad to you from tariqah so-and-so or book from tariqah so-and-so, right? It's not someone like the faqir, your needy brother. My teachers have authorized me to teach some books in tasawwuf, right? I could teach that to someone. I could give ta'aleem or transmit to that. But is that tahdhib? Is that someone's taking me as their guide? Absolutely not. One of the most dangerous things that I fear most is ever making that claim. Someone who makes that claim typically has a bad ending. What does that mean? They die outside of al-Islam. They're extremely strict about that in tariqas that are actually still sound and based on knowledge. Nobody just runs around making claims. Waliyadu billah ta'ala. That's a sign of ignorance. And then sheikh of fath, that's the sheikh upon whom, the hands of whom one's opening is decreed, if an opening is decreed for someone, right? And that is in an-nafais al-ulwiyah, heavenly gems or heavenly jewels. What is the title of that, Sheikh Amin? An-nafais al-ulwiyah, that is translated under? That's in there, though. Yeah, that's in there, and it's available at the Masjid bookstore. Okay, so those are a few terms. And then I want to just give some, just examples, and then I'm going to bring a definition that is not this isn't a formal definition, right? But inshallah ta'ala, this will bring it down home to us and remind us a little bit about how we should be. A person of learning, no, not that one. It's an-nafais al-ulwiyah, heavenly gems or celestial gems or jewels, and nafais al-ulwiyah. Personally, if I was going to give a simple practical definition, this is from Abdul Karim. Thank you. Yeah, that's the book. It's in there. He describes these 3 types of sheikhs. Imam Haddad describes that there. And also he describes the qualification of a sheikh in tasawwuf, who's in either category of tahdhib or the category of fath. He gives it in good manners, right? And that person has knowledge of the sharia, has traveled the spiritual path, has experienced the haqiqah, right? Meaning they reached a point where they had no perception of anything other than Allah, including themselves. And they were brought back from that state to what's called al-baqa in order for them to give benefit to the servants. And those people are extremely rare. They were so rare, Imam Haddad says in the Book of Assistance, that some of the akabir, he said, some of the akabir, and my time, yep, I got my time, but I'm still, some of the akabir said that they were extinct. And they say that out of protectiveness of them. They're present. They will always be present. Tayyib. And then just bringing like a basic practical definition this is from me. This is Abdul Karim speaking. I'm not quoting my shuyukh, what have you. But it's based on athar. An alim is someone who knows how to say, I don't know. Right? The alim is a person who says, I don't know. Someone who never learned how to say I don't know is nothing in Islamic knowledge. That the alim is someone who said I didn't know, and then they sought those people of learning, loved them, connected to them, revered them, took from them, and transmit from them. When we were in Tarim, the most likely person to say they had to review before giving a fatwa were the elder muftis of town. And I began to take that as a measure of a faqih, right? And Ibn Ata'illah says this in his aphorisms, that if I was studying fiqh with someone or asking questions of someone, and they said, Bagha muraja, this question needs muraja, I took that as an indication that this is a faqih. From numerous occasions where I asked someone like Al-Habib Ali Mashhur, Habib Omar's older brother who passed, Allah yarhamu, someone like Sheikh Muhammad Ba'udan, who's on the Mufti Council, someone like Sheikh Muhammad Ali Al-Khatib on the Mufti Council, or some of the more senior students of the likes of them, they were the most likely people to say, I have to review, right? Whereas a young student is someone who's very quick to answer with the limited information that they have. And Ibn Ata'illah said, if you see someone answering every question that they're asked, take that as an indication of their ignorance. It comes in Athar, in Ihya, from the Sahaba, that someone who says, I know, is ignorant. When someone says, I have known, they are ignorant, right? That is an indication of ignorance. So I don't know, that's a pathway to knowledge. And it also comes in Athar and Ihya, I don't know. Ma adri, I don't know, is one half of knowledge. Tayyib. So if we're going to travel a path of seeking knowledge, we have to become people who say, I don't know. And then lastly, before I mention a couple things about seeking knowledge, also what we saw both in Sham and in Hadramaut in the Yemen is among circles of learning, the learned, even the elders among the learned, they refer to those people, they refer to themselves, and they refer to each other as an expression in the case of another person. Like if I were to say this of Sheikh Amin, it would be a form of praise to him. Talib ilm. The word talib ilm is a form of praise, and they won't even give it like when the previous mufti died in Tarim, Sheikh Fadl Ba Fadl, and Sheikh Muhammad Ali was put in a certain position of fitya, who was his student. They said of him, of Sheikh Muhammad Ali Al-Khatib, Talib ilm. Right? That's someone who's read the Minhaj numerous times. He wrote all of Muhalli Sharh on Minhaj at-Talibin and gifted it to his Sheikh Fadl, and has taught Minhaj and been giving fatwa perhaps for decades. They called him what? Talib ilm. The ulama themselves, what do they refer to themselves as? Talib ilm. When we move it over into this North American arena, anyone who's given a mic and speaks a little bit about Islam is called a scholar. They're graduated to alim, right? Whereas many of those people, if they were in real environments of knowledge, and I myself included, I'm not excluding myself. I call myself tilmeed, right? They wouldn't even be called talib ilm, people that will call scholars, right? Then a little bit about the pathways. So someone knows that they don't know. They know that they don't know, and then they have to learn. So for example, if someone in the way we were taught was going to study fiqh, right? And I'm just giving this as an example, especially for time's sake, but by this you could draw an analogy to other disciplines. When we were studying fiqh in Tarim with the scholars there, right, and the seekers of knowledge there, we would study Risala al-Jami'ah, Safinatun Najah, and that's after Arabic, right? After Arabic, where you could sit and understand that text, right, which took a couple few years. Then we began studying those other texts. Risala al-Jamia, Safina to Najat, which was memorized. Al-Mukhtasar al-Saghir or al-Latif, which is a lesser Mukhtasar of Sheikh Abdullah bin Abdurrahman Bafadl. Then Al-Mukhtasar al-Kabir, known as Al-Muqaddim al-Hadramiyah. Then Metchen Abi Shuja, and each of these is with a sheikh with commentary on the text. Then Metchen az-Zubad. And some of these were done simultaneously, a halakha in the morning, a halakha in the night. Then Al-Yaqut al-Nafis. Then La ilaha illallah. Then Umdat al-Salik. Sometimes they put Fath Mu'in there. Sometimes they put Fath Mu'in after Minhaj. Our halakha happened to do Fath Mu'in there. Then Minhaj at-Talibin. If someone studied Minhaj at-Talibin, with some of our teachers who were like muftis in training at that time, we would begin researching questions in like Tuhfa of Sheikh Ibn Hajar at the level of Al-Muqaddim al-Hadramiyah. I have a brother and a friend who's recently finished Minhaj after having done all of that and also reading in Fatawa, reading in the Fatawa of some of the Hadrami scholars, reading in the Fatawa of Sheikh Ibn Hajar al-Haytami, and so on. They, at some point during that process, they began receiving and writing answers to questions under the senior muftis, right? And, you know, the brother I referenced, Ustad Zayd, we hope he'll join us here in the United States next year. You know, they'll have like a year or so of, and some of my teachers in Tarim, they've had more than a decade of supervised writing of fatwas under the senior muftis, right? Where they're expected to, you know, derive from the manuals from which fatwa, which is gained, which in Tarim is largely going to be the Tuhfa Sheikh Ibn Hajar, which is a commentary on Minhaj. And, you know, they're expected to be able to reference everything they say. They're expected to be able to reference every fatwa they say, right? Reference it back to the narration of the scholars of the Shafi'i school. And to the point where, like our Sheikh Omar Hussein al-Khatib, who, you know, as long as I've known him, which is since like, maybe not as long as I've known him, but since around 2000, he's been doing supervised work in Fatawa under the senior scholars of Tarim. He said that his shuyukh would get on his case if he brought something from one of the other books and it was in Tuhfa. If you bring it from Mughni al-Minhaj and it's in Tuhfa, they're going to get on your case. He said when he was testing in Umdat al-Salik, Sheikh Fadl, who was a late mufti, Allah yarhamahu, he gave him a whole bunch of wrong answers when he had mentioned the hukam correctly because he didn't phrase it the way that it was phrased by the fuqaha, right? He gave the right answer, like, what is the ruling of this? The ruling of X is Y. But he didn't phrase it like the nusus of the fuqaha. And Sheikh Omar said to us, al-fiqh nusus, right? Fiqh is based on texts that are transmitted from the jurists, right? The ijtihadat and narration of the scholars of the madhab. That is fiqh. It's not just this is what so-and-so thinks or this is what so-and-so says and so on. Now, la ilaha illallah. Someone who read Minhaj in Tarim, they wouldn't call him an alim. They would call those senior muftis maybe who are training those younger muftis, and that training under those that training of those younger muftis under the senior muftis, as again, some of my teachers has been 20 years. I met an elder Habib from the family of Al-Attas when Habib Ali Mashur visited him in Hurayba, right? And he said, no one was like your father, Habib Muhammad bin Salim bin Hafid, right? And Habib Mashur was talking to him, and he said no one was like him because he referenced everything he said. And this older Habib said to Habib Mashur, who's, again, he served for decades. He was a man in his 60s or 70s, and he sat next to this older Habib like he was a child, someone who's from the generation of his father, right? He sat And when they sit with elders, they'll make sure their head's a little bit lower than them, their voice is a little bit lower than them. That old man, I heard him say to Habib Mashur, La ahad yatajarra ala al-fitya. No one is so audacious than to give a fatwa from himself. Right? You got to transmit that. Right? You have to transmit that from the ulama that preceded you. Right? La ahad yatajarra ala al-fitya. Right? And he said, I think he referenced, it was one of the Shatiris, that a letter came to him in a case of istiftah. They were asking a fatwa. And he said, this letter reached us from someone who says his name is X about question Y. He wouldn't even substantiate the claim that this man made to what his name was, right? Without evidence. Because he's not going to say anything that's not based on knowledge, right? Al-hukm bi ghayr ilm is haram. You can't come to a judgment, a conclusion in law without knowledge, right? So that's a little bit about knowledge, a little bit about the pathway. Am I saying not to learn? Absolutely not. I'm just saying let's all be seekers of knowledge, folks. And if you want to travel through a curriculum, and you know, we're a Mauritanian to list, I believe, a Maliki curriculum, it would be very similar, book to book to book to book to book, getting up to a relative proficiency and training for decades, for the life of your shuyukh, under your shuyukh. And that's another thing. There's people here that they see as the senior scholars. They wouldn't be talib ilm in Asham or the Yemen. They know it and we know it. So quit fooling people on the show. People are saying we're going to produce muftis so no one needs to travel anymore. That's a bunch of crap. The State Department told people to stop sending those people overseas after September 11th, and them brothers are scared, so they flipped the script. Allah knows best. But how in the world are seekers of knowledge over here, where among the blind, the one-eyed man is king? Anybody who tells you you don't still need to travel and seek knowledge, wallahi, he's tricking you. He traveled. They traveled. Wait a minute. Y'all went like 20 years ago and then you came back and you've reached the top level of knowledge and no one has to ever travel anymore? Like 14 centuries since the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and then now American Islam reaches its pinnacle where suddenly people are pulling fatwa out of their pockets for the people and nobody needs to travel and seek knowledge. And another thing, some of those things are lies. In the last year, I've heard someone tell a lie. You used to be able to go to Hadramaut and study. Now you can't go to Hadramaut and study anymore. That's a lie. I don't know who twisted their arm to tell that lie. Maybe they want to gather students up under them. Maybe the State Department told them to say that. I don't know. But what I do know is I just dropped teenage girls to Hadramaut to study last month, right? You could still travel and seek knowledge. Traveling and seeking knowledge, and that's a tangent, but just be careful, Yanni, of someone who just says, like, we're the tops of these totem poles and we're going to give fatwa for the world, Yanni. You're going to do it? Come on. And Allah knows best. And then I'll just conclude with one last point. And some of this is anecdotal, but stories. When Sheikh Fadl bin Irfan was getting ready to die, Sheikh Omar Hussein, who studied with him for years, said this. When Sheikh Fadl, Ba Fadl, got ready to die, you know how like a secretary, a good secretary, sometimes your wife or like your kids, they could sign checks for you. They could sign your signature. They could sign off memos, right? It's called a tawqi' anhu in Arabic. The mufti said, now I'm going to go meet the one whose memos I've been signing for all of these years. That's a mufti. He's saying, I'm going to go meet Allah, who I've been signing off. This is a ruling in the Sharia of Allah for all of these years. Like, he recognized the gravity of that responsibility. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us to learn. And again, we're very happy to just be servers of seekers of knowledge and servers of transmitters of knowledge. But anyone who tells you, you don't have to go study, just study with me. There's no more knowledge. I'm the top of this totem pole. I'm going to generate these fatwas for our people or for the American public and blah, blah, blah. They'd never get away with that in circles of knowledge. They know it and we know it. You never get away with that. I don't know who told them to say that. Allahu Alam, it sure did seem like people changed their tune after September 11th when it became unpopular to travel and study anymore. I don't know who told them to say it, but don't let people flip the script on you. Go travel, seek knowledge, meet people of learning that travel here, meet people who gathered knowledge. And just one last point, knowledge is taken from those above you, those at your same level, and those below you, right? And the most given people to learn are going to be the scholars. The quickest people to say, I don't know, I have to review, what is in a book and so, are going to be the scholars, right? And Allah knows best. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa alayhi salam. And y'all know I have to keep it real, right? I have to keep it real. This is a message to the grassroots. You know, sometimes we see stuff happening, man. And I feel like just when you listen to the message to the grassroots, and Malcolm talked about so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so was in the room, and they took money from X, Y, and Z, and you can see people faking it. People are faking stuff. Don't let people fake stuff to you. Learn yourself. Connect to scholars yourself. Learn what the references are. Where are you getting it? Like I talked to my wife today. Such and such teacher said this ruling. Oh, great. What teacher? From what book? That's fiqh. Al-fiqh nusus, right? It comes from transmitted text of the ulama. Unless somebody's claiming to be a mujtahid, like, okay, tayyib akhi, you became mujtahid mutlaq now, we're going to take your fatwa without transmission. If you're not that, forget it. Allah knows best. Off 1 minute.
MashaAllah. I guess we don't have anything else to say after that.
The show is over.
MashaAllah. But I'll let the brothers go first because I know you got to get ready to go. So if y'all have some comments or questions, some clarifications for Sheikh Abdul Kareem, please feel free.
I ain't got nothing.
I saw your mic was unmuted. I thought you were going to say something. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Yeah. Sheikh, is it because a lot of times, because we have different titles, like, for example, you know, I'm an imam. When I travel, like, I know I'm an imam just because, you know, I'm doing the job of the imam. I know I'm not qualified. And when I travel and I see imams in Islamic places, it only highlights to me how much I'm not qualified. For example, when you travel, you find that, you know, the average guy who's the Imam of Masjid, he memorized the Quran. I mean, that just goes without saying, right? But it's not the same for a lot of us over here. And that goes on to even different levels of scholarship. And so I'm saying and asking, do you think that because of the way Islam reached us, and because some of us hold different titles and we're trying to do the best with what we have, that we tend to lower the totem pole and redefine, you know, these different things, scholarship, imam, and all of these things?
That's a good question. If I could answer a slightly different question, but related to what you said, I mean, first of all, imam is anyone who stands up and leads a prayer. And they shouldn't be ummi and fatwa and Fatiha. They shouldn't be illiterate in Fatiha. They should be able to recite it all and know the various rulings of the prayer that they're leading. You know, how to do sujood sahu, how to do Jumu'ah, and what have you. And the places I've traveled, is very common for a neighborhood masjid imam not to be, you know, one of the stronger seekers of knowledge, not necessarily to be hafid. If he's going to do taraweeh, he'll be hafid. And it's also not uncommon that some of the fuqaha aren't up to the level of taraweeh imams. That's kind of like a certain specialty that some may have and some may lack. It's certainly not needed for other than being an imam of taraweeh to be hafid, if that taraweeh is going to do a khatam. The issue of title, I want to answer it in a slightly different way, and this is something of a transparency. One of our brothers studied briefly in Hadramaut and returned, our brother Omar Mahmoud. And he asked the question after that people would call him sheikh or this or that. And I asked Sayyid al-Habib Omar, and this relates a little bit to Saluk as well. What should he do? You know, he asked, what should he do? And he said he shouldn't spend a lot of time asking them not to call him this or that. but he should attribute it to those that really deserve it. So any praise that's given, we attribute it to those from whom we took, the foremost of them being the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like Ibn Ata'illah says, if people praise you with what you don't deserve, praise Allah with what He deserves, right? So they'll say, someone alim and say, I'm a khadim of the ulama. This is the barakat Rasulillah. They'll just attribute it to the ones who it really comes from, and not busy ourselves a lot with what people say. But I believe, how did these things change? I think they changed two ways. One, among the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Two, we surrendered the reins of much of our Islamic discourse to the marketing coordinators of the Muslim show, to the people on the circuit who make a flyer. And if I overpraise someone, it's going to make my program look more important than it is. And I've had people do that to me. And I think that's really what skews things. As for someone being treated with respect, Sheikh Amin could probably agree with this. As a young man in his 20s, stepped off the plane in Syria, and the Sufiya would call you Sheikh so-and-so, Sayyidi so-and-so. They're just so humble, they're going to treat everybody with respect. But it was known, like, how do you know someone who's legit as a teacher? You know their teachers. They're not going to take knowledge. Obviously, I could barely speak Arabic and hadn't studied any tajweed and maybe one hukam at that point with ulama. But they're going to treat you with respect. But obviously, if you were to sit up on a chair and try to become Mufti Fulan, someone pull you aside, say, that's not for you.
So, quick question to you. Mentioned several types of sheikhs, and you mentioned the sheikh of teaching, the sheikh of training, the sheikh of one's spiritual opening. And our context, because, we have this reality of Islam as it was conveyed through our chains of transmission, and for people having aptitude, as you mentioned, to what we see today here in America. And the question usually comes, well, you're trying to say we don't have no scholars among us in the West. How do you join between a reality and a false delusion that exists? And how do we find a middle ground with this?
I would say that's exactly what we're saying. Exactly what we're saying is we don't really have ulama yet. We don't have ulama, right? Generally speaking, I mean, I don't claim to know everyone and what they've studied. I have met some of the scholars, some of the people that are called alim, that be ma'na al-kalima, right? Possessors of knowledge, be ma'na al-kalima. But what I will say is we shouldn't throw that around. And we should get used to the reality and the term of seeking knowledge. We should have a movement and a generation that's really about seeking knowledge. And maybe some of those people will reach the point that they're legitimately an alim. But another thing is, it's not about claiming that one got to any point. Like Ahmad bin Hanbal, they asked him, how long are you going to carry your inkwell? And he said, al-mahabir ila al-maqabir, right? Inkwells until the grave. Many of the learned die seeking knowledge, either reading a dars or having a dars read to them on their deathbed, right? So they could die seeking knowledge. So seeking knowledge is your whole life. Seeking knowledge is a great praise. In circles of knowledge, they refer to themselves as seekers of knowledge. There's nothing wrong with us adopting that. Adopting, a culture and a vocabulary. We're seekers of knowledge, and many times we'll say that. Like you'll hear the fakir say that. You'll hear Sheikh Amin. If I was in a call with Sheikh Amin, we need to pull together a meeting of talabat ilm. He would know who I was talking about. We're asking Sheikh Yahya wrote us. We're asking Ustad Ubaidullah Evans. We might invite Imam Zaid. And Imam Zayd wouldn't consider that an insult to him if we said we're going to have a meeting of Talabat Ilm, right? Because that's what his shuyukh would do, right? There's nothing wrong with us adopting that vocabulary, and then we just do the work. We do the work of learning and teaching, and we keep doing it until we die. And if we get to the place where we have solid institutions that are churning out people that give fatwa in the questions we need here in North America, fabiha wa ni'ma, right? It's happened in West Africa. I've seen it as far to the east as Indonesia and Malaysia and Thailand. And those people never stop traveling to seek knowledge. That's one of the fake things they've tried to sell us since September 11th. And they quote Indonesia. We know Indonesia very well. We've been there. We studied side by side on our knees with those brothers we've been knowing them brothers since 1997, right? And those brothers until now, someone might be a son of an alim who all his life has been in seeking knowledge. His father may have hundreds or thousands of students, and when he reaches his late teens or 20s, he's going to be still sent off to Al-Azhar. He's going to be still sent off to Tarim. He might have been sent off to Mecca with Sheikh Muhammad al-Alawi al-Maliki al-Mekki, expected to go and refine himself, have some of the benefit of being away from home and what's familiar, gain different transmissions of knowledge, chains of transmission, higher chains, different chains, and bring all of that back home. There's no reason that we can't do the same thing. And throughout that whole process, that person wouldn't consider it an insult if he was called talib ilm, a seeker of knowledge. And loosely they may say al-ulama, meaning, those that have some knowledge that they transmit. But like somebody's at the top of the totem pole, and then we no longer travel and connect to chains of knowledge everywhere and anywhere in the world. That simply hasn't happened before this generation. And you never hear that kind of thing except in North America, right? I've never heard that. And especially you hear it, you've heard it after September 11th, and it's almost like somebody wanted to make somebody happy and think we're not traveling to those bad countries anymore that people don't want us to travel to.
By your estimation, and you mentioned it, that we're not at that level of ulama now. At the present state of affairs, as you know it to be in our country around that, how many years from your just estimation of looking and your experience with diligent effort do you think it would take us to reach that from this stage that you are, from your own observation, realistically?
Like if we were to say,
besides the karama we're talking about, not
if we were to say those that are called alim and alama by the ulama of those countries, we were to say that typically those are probably men in their 60s. And their lifespan of teaching and stewarding, they're like in their 50s and 60s, and they're going to live 20, 30, 40 years of teaching from now, right? I would say that for someone who's a seeker of knowledge right now, to reach that point, they're going to have to keep the company of one of those ulama for the rest of his probable life expectancy, about 20, 30 years. And until their sheikh leaves this world, they're going to be willing to defer to their sheikh in the difficult questions that occur. That's an alim. Someone that continues to say, I don't know, until the sheikh passes on. And the ulama, the generation before them, passes on. Right? And Allah knows best. Yani, I can't quantify, but what I will say is they'll be seekers of knowledge until their shuyukh die. And they look around and there's no one else for them to ask anymore. Right? That's what I've seen in my own sheikh's life. That's what we saw from the Sahaba, radiyallahu anhum. And anybody that thinks they're just going to hit the heights, give me 10 years and now I'm this alim and I don't need to travel and ask anyone more knowledgeable than me anymore, that person's deluded, yani. And personally, I wouldn't take from someone like that. Not seriously. Take a narration here or there, but following that person, you don't follow that person.
All right, Sheikh, I know you have to go.
Y'all got me fired up.
Hey, no, this is, as I said, I wonder We mentioned this earlier, and someone, as I told you, and they put you out, and that's why I called you specifically, because there is this sometimes divide friends through questions, right?
Allahu Akbar.
Like, oh, they tight. Let me throw an arrow in there and mess it up. But sincerity will break all of that. And anyone who, as you mentioned, has actually spent any amount of time witnessing true scholars knows the difference.
Knows the
That's
difference.
the point you was
Knows the
making.
difference. Yeah.
We were in Shem. We saw the scholars of Hadramaut. We saw the scholars of Egypt. We saw the scholars of Morocco. We saw the scholars of India, Pakistan, and we know for sure what a scholar looks like.
Allahu Akbar.
We know one of the things I say about that, we talk about asanid, chains of narration, and you mentioned Ahliya and Senate. And the same people that may have such a claim, if I ask them, give me your Senate in these knowledge, they cannot. They would fumble all over the place. And that's not to put anyone down, it's just speaking of reality, right? We're not there. We got to get there. What do we need to get there? But we'll never get there if we keep claiming. And that is one of the most important things that I think we should understand, so we can actually start the process for that 20, 30-year journey that you're talking about. But if
Hey, wait. And we're special people. Shouldn't the rules change? Shouldn't we have a different criteria because we're African American?
lower the bar.
Lower the bar? That's a
That was a joke.
sarcastic question.
All right, Sayyidi, if you have any last questions, so we'll let you go. Unless it got canceled, and you can go on.
No, it didn't. I got to log in. So this one was sent to me by a sister Tahira Waliuddin. So
Yes.
if a person has the title Imam, doesn't mean that they are truly an Imam or they don't know how to be one. I mean, that depends. That depends on who's calling them that and whether or not they're qualified to lead a prayer. They should learn up to, like an intermediate level in fiqh and recitation. They should be able to recite validly and lead a valid prayer if they're going to stand in front of other people and lead them in prayer, if that's what we mean by Imam. And any other question in the religion that they're going to answer, they have to answer it based on an aptitude and having taken that aptitude from those who possessed it and took it from those before them. And la ilaha illallah. And if I could just make one last point, that we are advised by those who we regard to be of alim, right? I was advised by someone I regard to be alim and I regard to be arif billah. The cause of all of the confusion that we see in this age are those who transmit knowledge without a sanad and a connection to the akabir, right? The greats of the learned who act upon their knowledge, who are knowers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what we try to live by, what I try to connect my own children to, and my wives and seekers of knowledge who I love, is we connect to the akabir, and we be seekers of knowledge and travelers on the spiritual path until we die. That's the way forward. Ahmad bin Zayn al-Habashi, he studied on the hands of Imam al-Haddad for 40 years. Right? He studied in scores of books, and all of this is after being what we would call a seeker of knowledge or an alim. Imam al-Haddad died, and Habib Ahmad bin Zayn al-Habashi was reading Muwatta with him. And Imam al-Haddad died and said, I'm going to die, and I'm tranquil, and Habib Ahmad bin Zayn al-Habashi is the Khalifa, right? He's my successor. That Habib Ahmad bin Zayn al-Habashi, that's a seeker of knowledge. Right? One studies until the end of one's life. And my own teachers who are younger, again, I've been watching them study under the elders of their school, if we could say, school of thought or tradition, for decades been watching them study under them. And it never stops. And there's no reason why we can't replicate that, right? Unless there's some sort of agenda, we want to say it's ours, say it's American, say it's black, say it's something. And there's nothing wrong with it being those things, but those things in and of themselves are not to be sought, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sought, his and the pleasure of the messenger is sought, true transmission from Allah and his messenger is sought. And if just like other peoples have done that and will continue to do that as long as the Quran's with us, our people can do that and become part of that. Inshallah, and we get there. We get there and we say, I don't know a whole lot on the way and during and after. And double check, because you're signing memos off on behalf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, it's not a light matter, and Allah knows best. May Allah reward you, brothers. Forgive me if I said anything too harshly more harshly than I needed to. Forgive me for rushing off. It feels impolite, but I have another Zoom meeting that I got to jump into. Place you all on Allah's care. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Okay, Imams, we've reached the halfway point. So if y'all want to give some comments, please feel free. I know it's hard to come after that act, but still got to do what we got to do.
Okay, well, I'll start. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulihi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsani ila yawm ad-din wa ba'd. So I would venture to say that since we're at the halfway mark, we should be at the full-way mark of the contribution. So if you haven't made a considerable donation up until this point, please be sure to do so. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala double multiply your reward. Be sure to, take care of that cover fee. And alhamdulillah, Sheikh Abdul Karim Yahya, may Allah preserve him. It's always a pleasure when he comes on. In addition to him being my fellow light-skinned brother, it's because we out of style, man. Everybody think we soft all the time. To hear another light-skinned brother get fired up is a good thing, But as he was talking about some of the issues about like Imam scholarship, I'm in agreement with Imam Naeem. They give me a title of Imam. And I think that's just the only appropriate Islamic title that it fits for our people. Because as I travel around and be around in the company of one of my teachers, most notably Imam Amin and other teachers, I know that I ain't got it, man. I ain't got it, But but if you're talking about someone, I came across this article. I was digging it up. It was by Dr. Ingrid Mattson. I know she's in the hot seat right now about some stuff she did for one of the students of knowledge. But she wrote an article some years ago, and I always kind of reflect on it. It was called "Advice for Students of Knowledge and Imams," and she gave a definition of a difference between the scholar and the imam. And one of the things she said about scholars, that scholars are primarily geared towards researching and memorizing and stuff like that. And what Sheikh Abdul Karim said, imam is basically one who leads the prayer or stands out front. But she gave another definition that I think fits me. I know it fits me. It's like the imam is like a pastor, or he's like the leader of the flock, the one who takes the concerns of the people, to give them good news, to nurture them, and to try to help them out. So, in that sense, I'm an imam, and I'm like a pastor, but I ain't a pastor that if I was to have $1 million jury, you ain't running up on me. You know what I mean? I ain't that kind of pastor, and you ain't taking nothing from me. So let's get that straight. But in the sense that, being a leader of people and putting my neck and back on the line and taking care of people and, try to serve their needs. In that sense, I'm an imam, and this is what I learned from my teachers, to be a service of people. And then sometimes you've heard me say that my appropriate title is Khadimun Nas Lillah, that I'm a servant of the people for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's what I basically do. And alhamdulillah, I know how to recite some Quran. I think the Al-Fatiha, depending on who's listening, alhamdulillah, I never had to sit in front of Sheikh Samir, you know, because I'd definitely I'd be canceled, you know, I'd be canceled quick. And but you know, that's my title, and it's just a pleasure to be able to serve the people, you know. But knowledge is always something that I'm seeking, and you know, this talk tonight and many talks that we had just shows how much more that we have to go. Because many times people will address us and think that we're like these great, you know, great imams and great scholars and sheikhs, and you know, often ask us questions. And sometimes, you know, when we're dealing with people, they think that we are supposed to be equipped to do some things, and you know, and sometimes they get disappointed. You know, there are people who ask me questions all the time, and I'd be like, I don't have the answer. I get back to you, and it might be a couple of days, you know, because I got to go ask people, and then I got to wait for them to get back to me, you know. And sometimes it's urgent. I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you. You know, I mean, this is a delicate situation. And then, you know, sometimes you got to filter out questions. You know, what I've been doing lately is if somebody asks me, give you a general scenario, they'd be like, what about such and such happens and such? And I'd be like, is this you? As first, is this your situation? You know, no, I'm asking for a friend. What's your friend's name? Where they from? Do we know him? You know what I mean? Because I want to know this specific situation, or you just, you know, you want to hear some type of story. You know what I mean? So, but alhamdulillah, you know, that's who I am as an imam, just being a servant of the people, a leader of a flock, and you know, being concerned with the people's needs and trying to address them as best as I can. You know, alhamdulillah. But many of the things that Sheikh Abdul Kareem mentioned, you know, that we really have to strive hard, and all of us are, you know, tulabul ilm, you know, seekers of knowledge, inshallah ta'ala. And one of the things he mentioned that was interesting is that when it transfers over to North America, you know, we've often heard this term of people who are students of knowledge, and we've reverenced some of these people in some instances. You know, I particularly remember, you know, when I used to be with the Wahhabi movement, you know, that the students of knowledge, they were the go-to people, you know. And then when you really learn what knowledge was, and you know, the prerequisites of having just the basics of knowledge, you know, a lot of them that didn't have it, you know. A lot of them, they just learned some Arabic, and they was able to come over and, you know, present themselves as someone who has some kind of profound knowledge, and um, it caused a lot of problems. So yeah, this thing of knowledge and learning proper knowledge, and you know, what we know is traditional Islamic knowledge, where you sit in front of a teacher, the teacher reviews what you know and then gives you permission to teach it. You know, student to teacher, student to teacher, student to teacher, passed down through the generations, is what we really have to get to. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq. I mean, yeah, that was all I had, man. Did that work? Did that work, Otis?
Most definitely, Imam Naeem.
You know what I have been thinking about since a few minutes before Sheikh Yahya, Abdul Kareem Yahya signed off up until now. You know, especially now because social media, there's like a whole cottage industry of different like get rich quick schemes, right? They've always been around, but social media makes it more, right? So you have all of these people that have the way for you to get rich. All you have to do is subscribe to something and buy this package, or pay to get in this class. And all of these people, they have similar marketing strategies. They, instead of selling you what the informing you what the actual product is, they sell their lifestyle, meaning all of their promotional materials, it's them in, you know, luxury, you know, driving around luxury cars, showing you their luxury houses, right? But a lot of times right in front of you, the obvious proof that this lifestyle that they claim to be living is fake is that they're asking you to purchase their $30, their $50, their $200, their $500 package for them to teach you how to get rich like them, right? And a lot of times when these people get exposed, right, they the cars that they were in on their social media were rented, right? The house that they did the photo shoot in or they did the interview in was Airbnb, right? Everything about them is fake, right? And a lot of these people I can name some people that you'll probably heard some names before, but when these people get exposed, they find out that everything about them is fake. And if they do have any money, it's because the people that believed in them brought those packages, those $50, those $500 course materials and stuff like that. That's how they get their money. And then, when that's over, then they reinvent themselves and come with some other package. And so I was thinking about this cottage industry that exists, and it a lot of times it's involving what they call multi-level marketing, or sometimes it's a lot of different things. But in any case, sometimes when we talking about scholarship, we talking about us in North America. I started thinking of the same thing because he referred to the show. You referred to the show, Imam, Amin, many times. And a lot of time, if you zoom in on a lot of people who may be part of the show, it looked like scholarship. When you zoom in on it, a lot of times these people, they're great autodidacts, meaning they're autodidactic. They're able to teach themselves a lot of things on their own with no teachers. And sometimes their biographies is crafted in such a way that you think they sat at the feet of scholars for all of these years. When you zoom in, there's no connection there. They're lying, right? And oh yeah, well, I'm a scholar because I spent time, whatever. But when you zoom in, you find out it's fake. And then people turn around and, like Sheikh said, you don't have to, go no place to study, right? Matter of fact, you could just come over here to my institute or my organization or my masjid, and you could just take from us, right? You don't need to do all of that. But if you buy into that and you go into that, you basically you never get rich. You never get to the scholarship that you think you're going to get to because it's a sham, it's a fraud. And so this was on my mind, a comparison between the two, because we got actual scholarship, and then you have the thing that looks like scholarship, and just like the person that's running a financial hustle, the person that's running the Islamic scholarship hustle is claiming that they're going to show you a shortcut to do to achieve all of that. But all you got to do is sign in with them and pay the requisite fees, and then you get. There's a lot of similarities between the two. That's what's on my mind.
But here's one of the things that I want to highlight out of all this, because one of the main points that we wanted to emphasize is that there is a difference between scholarship, Islamic scholarship, and non-scholarship. And they shouldn't be confused, right? So that's just one aspect. And what we never want to do, right, is lower the bar. Just because we don't want to put in the work to achieve the objective, right? So, we always say we don't want a microwave Islam. Now, once you know scholarship, or you have an idea what it looks like, the wise people, and may Allah make us all wise, will train their best to pursue that avenue. Not like today, where everyone thinks they can become that. That's not realistic. Our lifestyles don't even permit for most of us to do that, right? That's one aspect. So the lifestyle that we live in the West is not suitable for all of us, nor is it realistic to even think about engaging in that. That's one aspect. Another aspect is just intellectual ability. Not all of us are at that level of intellectual capacity to do the work what scholars need to do, right? Not all of us have the ability. I know many people who went to study and they just couldn't cut it. They ain't bad people. They just didn't have the intellectual and a capacity to handle the load that needs to be a scholar. Nothing, good Muslims, believe in Allah and His Messenger, sincere, just don't have the aptitude for it, right? And that's like, even in our secular world, not everybody's going to be a doctor. You have people who go to school and say, I want to be a doctor, until they get in, or I want to be a lawyer. Then when they get into university and they see what the course or the curriculum is to achieve that, the workload, they realize they don't have the ability to do that. So they end up switching their major or switching, what they're going, because you're not capable of that. Not because you're a bad person. That's just a gift that you don't have. Then another aspect that is a reason why we have so many people pretending to something that is really not their claim is there is no real financial benefit in the West for such expertise. There's no benefit, especially when we have an environment that doesn't respect scholarship. And the biggest proof of that is that title of scholar is given to anyone, whether they deserve it or not, which in itself is disrespectful to scholarship, right? And so these are things that we should look at. So a solution for us is something that I think I don't know if we missed it. And the scholars say this, and Sheikh Abdul Karim, he mentioned this, that the seeker of knowledge, right? Talibul ilm, the seeker of knowledge, is not a true seeker until he loves from those who are above him, which in this case are the scholars. They're above him in knowledge and in rank. So he's going to learn from them. And those who are equal to him, his companions, his colleagues, at his level of seeking knowledge, he's going to have recourse to them, right? So when we talk outside of these platforms, we really discuss stuff and we share information. What do you think about this? What did you learn about this? Because all of us learn things that others don't know. So if you look at Sheikh Abdul Karim, he has information I don't have. I have information he doesn't have. So we share ideas, we share thoughts. He met with teachers that I didn't meet with. I met with teachers he didn't meet with. So we share, right? Then also, those who are beneath you in knowledge. In other words, there can be someone who has one case that you don't have. Just one case. And in relation to you, that person is a learned person in that issue that you need, that you don't have. And it could have been just by hearing. Something happened to us when Sheikh Samir was here that I think was very significant, which shows you that. So the Sheikh was mentioning his chain of narration back to a particular book. And one of our brothers, Abdullah, he was recording it. He was in the room. And another student was reading on the Sheikh the chain of narration. Through the student who wasn't the lower student, in this case, that particular brother who was recording was not really like a student of knowledge, but he was a lover and he was in the room. By him recording it, I overheard it. So when I overheard it, I caught the mistakes. So I told him, tell the other student there is a lot of mistakes there. And let's fix those mistakes, right? That's everybody sharing in it. The one that's above the sheikh is there. The one that's equal is there. And the one who's lower in status and knowledge in terms of that, right, is present. Everybody working together to get a good product, right? It works. So it doesn't mean because you're not a scholar or you're not a real seeker in pursuit of the knowledge that you can't benefit. That's not the intent. But what we don't want is none of us making claims, right, that we don't have, right? Our teachers told us, and I will never forget it, that seeking knowledge, saying I don't know in its proper place is half of the religion, right? Saying I don't know in its proper place is half of the religion. And that takes time to get there because that's not the environment most of us were taught in or learned about the deen. We were learning environments, go for it. You on the Quran and Sunnah and do your thing, bro. And we have to change that narrative if we're ever going to produce real scholarship. I think this is extremely important, that we have to change the environment while at the same time encouraging people to do what they have the capacity to do in terms of seeking, right? It doesn't mean to say it's only the scholars and we can't do nothing. No, we don't have that environment. So we have to do what we have to do while realizing we're not where we want to be and not getting in the way of us actually getting to where we need to be by deluding ourselves that we're somewhere we're not. I think, is this point, did it get across to everyone? That's a question for those attending. There is no substitute for learning Islam from qualified teachers. My concern is that we limit who can contribute to the Islamic movement to an extreme extent. I would ask you, Brother Khalil, to maybe give you the opportunity to clarify what you mean before, because I don't know what you mean. Islamic knowledge, qualified teachers, learning Islam, Islamic movements, these are all different things. So if you like, we would welcome you to come and express, maybe, because that's a lot. That's a lot inside that one statement. If you want, you can come in and speak it. That would make it easier. Or you can type it and we try to figure it out. But that's a lot in that question, unless someone else grabbed something that I missed. Imam Naeem,
It
Imam
was
Faheem.
good you said that because I was going to respond to that comment, but I may be responding to something that he didn't even intend. So
Well, it's never late to take a jab at it, since we all scholars. Go ahead, Sheikh. Give me your fatwa. First up.
I agree with his first sentence. I think we're all on the same page with that, right? There's no substitute for learning Islam from qualified teachers. Then he says, my concern is that we limit who can contribute to the Islamic movement to an extreme extent. I think in some cases, a lot of people want to contribute in the areas where they're not qualified.
Mm.
Like, for example, somebody may want to be the teacher or the imam, and he's not qualified for that, but he's a good public relations person. Or maybe he's even a good leader, right? He could be the leader, but not every leader is a teacher. Not every teacher is a leader, right? Some people are builders. Some people are good at rallying people together and motivating people. Just because you're good at one, that doesn't mean you have to do it all, you know? And so, I don't know his context or what he's talking about, but from my personal experience and observation, right, a lot of people want to contribute in the way they want to contribute, and it is not always a good fit for what the movement needs. They have a skill set, but they don't want to contribute based upon that skill set. They want to contribute based upon something else that they're not really good at.
Yeah, just to address it briefly. Yeah, I think it should be a limit to who can contribute to the Islamic movement. You know, especially when we talk about knowledge, because you know, one of the bamboozlements that we have is that people who are feigning Islamic knowledge or got some training with some incorrect Islamic knowledge are taking the helm of trying to, you know, teach Islamic knowledge. And there's just some things that, you know, that we don't accept as proper and traditional Islamic knowledge. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, you know, for instance, you know, nowadays, a lot of people think that, you know, graduate from the University of Medina is like standard, you know, and they think that anybody that comes out of there is like knowledgeable. And you hear people, you know, listening to them and taking them as scholars, and you know, because they reached a level in that particular institution, that they are seen as like, you know, like great teachers and stuff. And you know, some of the stuff that they're teaching is just, you know, incorrect, you know, even if it sounds good. So there should be a limit to, you know, what the route of knowledge is, you know, from qualified teachers, sheikhs, and you know, and ulama, and you know, where they're teaching people and giving them the permission to teach. And of course, everyone should know their lane. You know, if you if you know one hadith and you mastered it, you know, you teach it. You know, you actualize it, and you know, you show an example of it. But that's my take on it. Yeah, there should be a limit, inshallah.
Let me before I go pray, I want to add something to this, right? Everything has levels. If you remember when Sheikh Abdul Karim was mentioning, and this is in every school, uh, that there is a sequence of learning that is established in every school. So when we talk about scholar, you're talking about the extreme end of the road, as Sheikh Abdul Karim mentioned. You're talking about the end of a journey. And a lot of it goes over our head because we're not familiar with those books. So we don't know what is actually being said. We just hear names. So he went from a basic summarized beginner's text for an introduction to Islam itself to scholarly works of research and legal judgments that belong with a judge. See, when we think of someone giving a legal judgment, we don't realize that in Islam, that's for a judge under an Islamic structure, not for the local guy in the masjid. He doesn't give judgments. He refers to the scholars. But since we don't have that system, we can't even imagine someone studying Islamic law for 20 years. For us, that's like, huh? So we don't have no context for that. Part of it is, and I can speak on it more after I pray, is a lot of us never follow the madhab correctly. So we've been taught in a way that's counterproductive and actually contradictory towards real scholarship, right? So I just get some hadith and I get the Quran and I start making judgments. I don't even know what goes into that, right? So it's like trying to make a cake without the ingredients that are necessary to make the cake, right? And that's part of why you never get the cake. So I think when I gotta go pray, but I'll come back and I want to talk about something that he made, and I'll talk with Brother Khalil Mu'min. I'll get to your question too. But what we're trying to do is we realize, and I want to come back to his question. Please leave that question for me too. His statement about the imams in Detroit. It's not fair for Sheikh Abdul Karim to answer that because he's in Detroit. He'll take the direct hit. Let me take the hit. I don't live in Detroit. Let me stop. I'm from Jersey. I can take that. Now, wait a minute. Maybe I shouldn't because I got to come to Detroit this weekend. But no, I'm going to address that when I come back. But my point is, we want to fix the system, not disparaging what came before us, but we still need to fix the system. And inshallah, I'll talk about it when I come back. Barakallahu bikum.
I just wanted to add to that, right? During the time of the rightly guided caliphs, right? Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, Al-Hassan, may Allah be pleased with all of them, right? A lot of people don't know that Ali was considered the scholar, the judge from amongst them. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Ana Madinatul Ilm wa Ali Babuha." I am the city of knowledge, and Ali is its door or its gate, right? And so, during their governorship or their khilafat, many times they would refer to the legal judgments of Ali. And Umar even articulated it. He said it. He said, no one's to give fatwa in this city, in Abul Hassan Hay, while Abul Hassan, meaning Ali, is alive. Right? In other words, he's the chief judge. He's the Qadi. And I mentioned that situation referring back to what our brother Khalil Mu'min brought forth, because he said, let me get this statement here. He said, we have many imams in Detroit who have established Masjid and literally bled in the streets. They didn't present themselves as scholars, but they led communities with degrees of understanding that few have. There's nothing wrong with that. No, in Islam, there's nothing that says you, in order to be a leader, you got to be the scholar or the most knowledgeable. What it does says, if you're the leader and you're not a scholar or the most knowledgeable, that you got to have scholars around you. You have to take advice and you have to get guidance from scholars, but you can still be the leader. I don't know if it's like that now, because we don't even recognize leaders at all. But at one time in our community, the Black community, we always thought or felt like the most knowledgeable one should be the leader. And that's not always the good because there are qualifications of being a leader. And one of them is courage. And a lot of people that have knowledge don't have courage, right? A lot of them, they're scared. of a lot of things. And so, and these are, and I think one way that's will help us look at it, if you learn how to purify yourself and to make salat and the other acts of worship according to Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, in other words, following the madhab, a school, you notice that all of these acts, they have shurut, they have conditions, and they have fara'id, and they have integrals that must be maintained, or obligation that must be maintained throughout the act for the act to be valid. It's the same thing with leadership. Leadership has preconditions, and it also has integrals that must be maintained or kept throughout the act for it to be valid. So if we look at it in that light, I think it will help us, right? When we look at the qualifications for even the supreme leader, the Khalifa, or any leader under him, right? A certain level of knowledge is required, or at least recommended, but in the absence of that, as long as that leader keeps scholars or people that have that, that aptitude and propensity for that around them and seek advice from them, then there's nothing wrong with that person's leadership. One example of that comes to my mind is Askia Muhammad Toure from the Songhai Empire. He overthrew Sunni Ali in that old dynasty. That's why he got the name Askia. That's a title. That's not his name. His name is Muhammad Toure. Askia, because in their language, when they overthrew, some of the women said, "Oh no, not him." And the way you say that in that language is Askia. So he meant it as an insult. He took it like, you know what? That's going to be the title of the leaders in this dynasty, Askia. Right? And so he overthrew with support and advice from the scholars. He wasn't nowhere near the top scholars, but he was a general in the army, and it's because this leader was oppressing the Muslims. He claimed to be Muslim, but he was oppressing the Muslims and doing all of these things. The scholars basically gave him the stamp of approval to go ahead, get rid of this dude, overthrow him. And that's what he did. So I mentioned him because therein you have not only just a leader or an Amir, you have a Khalifa who arose, right, who wasn't the most knowledgeable, but he had the support of the scholars. As Allah says, Shawirhum fil amr, consult with them in the affairs. He consulted with the scholars, right? And so he led, right? If you would have waited for some of them other scholars who he took advice from to deal with the oppression and take leadership, would have never happened because they ain't have what he had. And so being the most knowledgeable is not a prerequisite for being a leader. And I think we need to remember that, and because a lot of times we think, okay, he's the most knowledgeable, so he should be the leader. No, leadership has shurut, has conditions. And one of those conditions is courage. And a lot of people that have knowledge don't have courage. And in a certain kind of way, I think a lot of them know that. And so, they try passive aggressive leadership. They don't ever lead people, right? They just form organizations, right? And they try to lead from the back door through their Islamic knowledge, but they're never in the front where people act according to the knowledge that they gave. And, they're never there to deal with the repercussions of people acting upon what they taught. But that's a whole nother story. So I just wanted to mention that. A lot of times we're talking about leaders. A leader doesn't have to be the scholar.
Yeah, and for the brother Khalil, those kind of imams you mentioned, most notably Imam Luqman Abdullah rahimahullah, may Allah have mercy on him. Those are our kind of, and in light of where we are, those are our kind of leaders, man, our kind of scholars that put their, life on the line for their communities, man, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give those murderers of him what they deserve. And you know, imams like Imam Asim, who recently passed, rahimahullah, you know, those imams that you mentioned from Detroit, I would like, you know, I like to come out there and meet them. I was out there a few weeks ago, and I was on some other business, so I didn't really get a chance to move around. But next time I want to come, and some of those servant leaders, imams, and warriors, you know, I like to come and kiss their hands, man. You know, kiss their foreheads. You know, because they're the kind of people that have, you know, put their lives on the line for us. So, and they are included, you know, in the kind of you know, the movement that we're trying to do, inshallah ta'ala. May Allah preserve the imams all across the country who are doing that work for their people. I mean,
So I was talking about, before I left, the difference between the levels of our knowledge in our communities and scholarship. So we had an indication of the rigorous work in one field of study that a scholar needs, right? We're talking about just one. He was talking about al-fiqh, and that was only in Shafi'i fiqh, in the school of Imam Shafi. So that same curriculum applies in the Hanafi school, in the Maliki school, and in the Hanbali school. That's just al-fiqh. Then you have issues of the creed, issues of spirituality, those secondary sciences, the fundamentals of al-fiqh, the fundamentals of al-hadith, Quran, tafsir, narration, all of these different sciences, that's for the scholars, right? Now, then you have the actual level of workers. And I think this is what our brother Khalil was mentioning when he was talking about imams who put in work. As an imam, and most of us know this, we're default imams. A lot of us, many of us, especially in the Black community, became imam by either the death of someone died, and they didn't have anyone else, and they picked you, right? A political overthrow of an imam, so they joined to each other. I want to be in charge, and that's how people got there. It was never really based, for most of our communities around the country, we didn't pick imams for their scholarly pursuits. That's just not real. And that's by far most of the communities. So there wasn't a succession of knowledge that was passed down to the next generation, and these are the qualified, learned people. This is what they learned. This is what they studied. That just is not real. So most of our imams were in leadership for other than studying sacred knowledge. I think this is safe to say. I mean, most of us, if we be honest, that's real. So for us, I think we should consider that and then look at, okay, saying we need to raise the bar in knowledge doesn't discount the great work that was done before and that continues to be done today by our leaders in our communities, right? That's accepted, and we should honor that, and we should respect that. But saying that that's not the level of knowledge we need shouldn't be taken as offensive. It should be something that we say, okay, we got to work on that. And those leaders themselves should open the door for that learning to exist at the same time while they're training the next generation of leaders. I think this is a thing that we gotta, because I think sometimes we gotta realize, because I think sometimes we're afraid of one thing happening, and because of that, we block something that is of benefit, right? I don't want to be discredited for all my work I did. So if I think more knowledgeable people coming is going to discredit that, I'll block that. And that's a mistake. It will be a mistake from the knowledge coming and discounting the hard work that our leaders did. That would be a mistake. But it also will be a mistake for our leaders or people to discredit the value of sacred learning when we don't have it, right? So we should join between the two. I think that's a very important thing. And this feeling of not admitting our capabilities has destroyed our communities without realizing it. We're lagging behind a lot because we didn't realize this fact. So I think that's just something that we should consider. Like, we should deeply consider, hey, how do we fix this for the future, right? And to be honest, if we look at the real thing, we're going to be generations doing this work. Most of us are not going to live to see the ideal communities that we need. We're not going to live that long. But we will, inshallah, live long enough to aid in the process. And I think that's this whole discussion. I believe that's what we want out of it. Did we achieve that? What do you think, Imam Faheem? And I'm asking those in attendance, do you think we got that point across, or there was some things we are missing in getting that across?
Yeah, I think we got the point across, and I think we do have the potential to take it to the next level, because there's a lot of bright spots in our communities. I was just thinking about the young brother we saw last week. Was it last week we were in Ohio, or the week before?
Yes, last week.
Yeah, to see the young brother that was Hafiz. And then a couple weeks ago, there was at the Jumu'ah, one of the sisters had brought her son. He came downstairs, and so they sent them over to me. They were like, tell him what you told us. And he said, I want to be Imam when I grow up. And I was like, yes, alhamdulillah. So, and I got a couple other young brothers that I'm working with to pass on the torch, to give them like some training and give them some pointers, and also catch them while they're young, to get them that traditional knowledge, inshallah ta'ala. Because like you said, I became a default imam. I'm like the Sealy from Color Purple imam. When member Mister told it, ain't nobody crazy enough to marry you. That's what they told me. Ain't nobody crazy enough to hire you. So I had to, fill in the spot and fill the void by, a masjid at the time was kind of dormant, and it was kind of abandoned, and so I guess from the experience I had before in leadership, people asked me to come to be the imam, which is, to our point, it's not always the most knowledgeable person is going to be the imam, because if that was the case, I definitely wouldn't be it, But alhamdulillah, we keep, trying to do our work, inshallah ta'ala, to take care of our people. But yeah, I think the point has gotten across. And this is one of the things that we always reiterate here on this platform, why we have to support each other, because we have the potential, and what we're doing to produce just for my 3453 family some scholarship, and then as it, extends to our respective communities, there's just a lot of stuff that we can do, inshallah ta'ala.
I forgot about what I was talking about. So we looked at that curriculum and just Shafi'i fiqh that Sheikh Abdul Karim mentioned, that was a hefty load, going from book to book to book to book to book, right? But in that process, how do we start? It's the same thing which we do every morning. We're reading books to get us in the spirit of learning, and that is to get, our whistle wet. Among us will be some that's going to go further than that. But for all of us, we have a basic level to understanding to even recognize what we need to know. That's a daily work that all of us can participate in, right? All of us can learn up to a certain level. And some of that is a personal obligation that everybody must know. Not all of it is needed for every individual, because one of the things that he kept mentioning was someone reaching the level of giving legal verdicts. We're not trying to give legal verdicts. We're just trying to practice our religion, right? So there's a certain level, like if you got up to just reading, I'm talking about just reading. I'm not talking about memorizing. I'm not talking about being tested. I'm talking about just reading and having access to the level of Umdat al-Salik, or reliance of the traveler. For most of us, or the Risala of Ibn Abi Zayd in the Maliki school, right? Or to Muqtasar al-Quduri or al-Ikhtiyar in the Hanafi school. Just getting to those levels in reading and hearing, right? To know what we need to know is beneficial, right? And that would help. Then among the students are those who are going to master this stuff, who are going to memorize it, who are going to know the evidences, who are going to go study. But all of us have a general comprehension of what we need to know. I think that's a lofty and an attainable goal that we can do. What do you think, Imam Naeem?
I agree. I was just thinking, like, I always try to think of parables and similitudes and things to what we're talking about. And I think with us, it's similar to a lot of our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents, depending on how old you are, who many of them didn't have any schooling or very little schooling, didn't graduate high school, or maybe didn't even attend high school, maybe because they had to work or whatever the situation was. But a lot of our grandparents or whoever were like that, right? They made sure that, okay, I didn't have a standard education, but I'm going to make sure that my children have a standard education. Right. I didn't go to high school, but you're going to go to high school. And then the next generation comes, okay, I didn't go to college, but you're going to go to college. I think it's the same thing with us, but there's something else in there. With a lot of us, we don't even know that there's an organized high school or that there's an organized college. We think there's just, a lot of us, we just think there's just some knowledge just floating out there. You just grab what you want. Like someone said in the comments, hodgepodge. A lot of us don't recognize, because of the way Islam reached us, that there are several systems, accepted systems that exist for learning. You start at first floor and you gradually work up. We don't know that it exists. It's just that, I didn't have enough knowledge, right? And we haven't even reached where our grandparents reached with, just general education. They know, okay, because they know that there were high schools there, but they couldn't go because they had to work in the factory or the farm. So their children, they completed high school. And then they took it to the next level. I didn't get a chance to go get higher education, college, university. You're going to college, university. I think for our situation, a lot of us don't know that college, high school, and university, that we don't even know that exist in Islam. I think a lot of us, we just if we're like what I was describing earlier, these gurus, what they call them gurus, these financial gurus, who they look like they got money and the presentation is tight. So you just plug into that system and you can get rich. But a lot of times you may end up, instead of getting rich, you get indicted, right?
Let him
And
off.
it's the same thing for a lot of us in Islamic knowledge, that well, a lot of times what we mistake for what real Islamic knowledge and scholarship is Islamic gurus. And if we end up following a lot of these people and what they're presenting as Islamic scholarship and what have you, we may not get indicted like dealing with taking advice from these financial gurus, but in worst case scenarios, we might be even leaving Islam. Because like we was talking earlier about how some people, they on the surface it looks like Ahl Sunnah wal Jamaat traditional learning, where they feel like they think that they've reached a level where they don't have to quote unquote color inside the lines. They can they they can go out this way because they think they've reached, they can make up their own creed in this particular issue right here, but still consider themselves Ashari. Or they can say, oh yeah, I'm Maliki, for example, but in this issue right here, I'm taking this opinion with that's no school accepts. Because they feel like they don't have to, they've reached the level of ijtihad in that particular area. And I don't want to get too complicated, but my main point was, once again, that we're like our predecessors, meaning our African American, our Black predecessors, who didn't have the luxury of a standard education. This is our situation in Islam. And a lot of us don't know that a standard Islamic education exists. There are teachers, there are books, and there's a curriculum. A lot of us still don't know that. And some of us know that, but we still too lazy to go to school. And we're even more, and on top of that, we won't go back to school ourselves, nor will we put or plug our children into those schools to get the lesson. Because I think really a lot of time is ego. Because a lot of us have been Muslim for 5, 10, 20, 30, 50, 60 years even, and we just can't fathom the thought of a significant amount of the things that I've learned are wrong, and I have to relearn. I think a lot of us don't even want to deal with that thought, so we just keep going like it don't exist.
All right, Imam, we almost at the 2-hour mark, so we can stop early today. I think we've got this point across. Unless there are any questions or statements that we have, we're going to bring it to a close. But we'll give an opportunity for a few questions if someone has some. Barakallahu fikum, Brother Kashif. May Allah reward you.
Did we reach our goal?
Yes. Brother Kashif said he's going to make sure we reach the goal.
Allahu Akbar.
And we do owe him another visit, so we got to put that on our schedule. We have to go back out to New Mexico, but this time more of a real sessions of learning and training, inshallah.
Did you see Khadijah's comment? I don't know if you dealt with it before I came back.
Yeah, we talked about it. That's just some things that mean about people not getting out the way and not having access. We have to develop that. And it is available. What Sheikh Abdul Kareem is doing at Dar Rahma, they're more in that position. They're getting there. They're acquiring property. And we got to start thinking like that. That maybe since they're like into it, you're starting a Quran school. Wherever there is the possibility, we need to work together to promote those initiatives, and after time we train. It's going to take time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, right? But what can happen overnight is, and what I mean in a very short time by overnight, we can fix our outlook towards things, right? And then act according to that, right? So, which was this point, because like we started with this, people got upset when you said we ain't at the level of scholarship here in our communities, which is not an insult, it's reality. When we talk about scholarship, once you clarify that, now we know what we got to do and where we working at, where we're missing, and what we need. And that's a good thing. Imam Faheem, you want to close us out with any final statements, comments, reflections?
Knowledge is power.
All right, who's going to close us out? Since there's no questions, no more comments, inshallah, I think we made the point. You got elected, Imam Faheem. There it is.
Alhamdulillah wa shukrullah. We thank all of you for joining this podcast tonight. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to raise you all in rank and to bless you and to double and multiply your rewards for your continued support. We thank you for your time. We thank our esteemed imams, our teacher, our leader of the band, Imam Otis, our genius, Imam Naeem, myself, the one who carries the crates for him, and our esteemed Sheikh Abdul Kareem Yahya for joining us, taking time out of his busy schedule to drop some gems on us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept it. Rabbana taqabbal minna innaka anta sami'ul alim. Amin. Al-Fatiha.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum